And here we go. And we are live. Thank you for joining us, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm very excited this morning to have a very special guest author on my channel, the one and only MP Woodward. He is a first-time Ryanverse contributor to my favorite series of all time, and he has recently released Tom Clancy's Shadow State. So thank you very much, Mike, for coming onto the channel. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And yeah, welcome.
Hey, Chris, delighted to be here. Thank you.
No worries. Now, I'm going to start by gushing. Or I reviewed the book on the channel, and it was a very favorable review and quite justifiably so. I want to share my thoughts on what I thought of the book. Okay, first of all, I loved it. And what impressed me the most about the book, Mike, is how you manage the characters. Because as a Ryanverse lifelong fan, I love the series. It's my favorite of all time. It's the action and the intrigue and political stuff is all great, but for me, it's the characters, which is the most important thing on the planet. And what you did with the characters, you were true to them. It was evident that you did your homework when writing these characters, because I'll give you a couple of examples. I mean, Jack Ryan Jr. is in his 30s now. He's sort of at a crossroads. He started off very green in Teeth of the Tiger, and I've just enjoyed watching him evolve over the series, because now he's a seasoned operator. He's older. He's battle-scarred. He's battle-wearied. He's been hurt, hasn't he? A lot. And he's been put through the ringer. And then, of course, there's a complication in his life with Lisanne, which is a very complex relationship, because in the campus, he effectively outranks her. And so there's a little bit of a dynamic there that's a little bit different. And so I think at the end of Flashpoint, he was considering stopping being an op in order to be with Lisanne. So there's a complexity there and some confliction as well, which is very interesting, which you've continued on very well. And I think from a continuity perspective, you've really nailed that. And I think the way you write about Jack Ryan Jr.'s relationship with Mr. C, as he's affectionately known, was really good too, because as you know only too well, that Jack Ryan Jr. tends to be a little bit impetuous and a little bit of a maverick and loose cannon, and it's up to John Clark to rein him in. And I could probably think John Clark would think to himself, "Kid, you're going to be the death of me," sort of thing. So he's sort of like a surrogate father figure, isn't he?
Yeah, you hit on a number of things that were important to me in writing this book. First off, a couple of macro thoughts on the Clancy series. You know, there's the senior series where that tends to be where Jack Ryan Jr. or Jack Ryan Sr. is the protagonist, and it's generally. I think we sort of tried to keep these apart, where the senior series is a little more like the traditional Clancy's with a big global plot. They're physically to be a little bit longer, etc. And so when my editors at Putnam came and said, "Hey, will you do this?" and we discussed it, that was some of the guidance I got, was that, look, make this a little bit more character driven. And in particular, when we look at Jack Jr., the way it was put to me is we would like to mature him, right? And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to develop him as somebody who has the sort of the complicating factors in life of somebody who's getting to be in his mid to late 30s, which means he's got to take making money a little more seriously. He's engaged to Lisanne. Like, okay, well, when are you going to pull the trigger on that, right? I wanted to give him some personal chafes about, he doesn't want to feel successful because of his father. He wants to make his own way. And as part of that maturity, I didn't want that to just be on the operator side. I wanted it to also be on the business side. So I had some fun with developing Henley as a private equity firm, and giving Jack an actual job where, the team was basically saying, "We need you to do this job. You need to quit operating for a little bit here because you're actually required on this very, very important deal." And so having him be annoyed with that and having to sort of let go of Lisanne, who was on an operation, was something that I had fun doing.
Yeah, he was pretty frustrated that he couldn't be in the Philippines because that's who he is, isn't he? I mean, he started off. That's his skill set, original skill set, being an analyst in financial circles. And when he can't operate, he feels, he doesn't like getting sidelined, not by any means. And yeah, I think how you wrote him, I had a comfortable familiarity when reading Jack Ryan Jr. when for your first time contribution. So it was I was really, really comfortable and fell into an easy groove with your writing there. And things like it's interesting you mentioned how the two contributions from yourself and now Andrews and Wilson, they're different. And I like that because the series is being explored from multiple angles.
Mhm.
I really like what Andrews and Wilson are doing with Katie at the moment. That's unbelievable. And I just think it's very thorough. The series is getting a really thorough continuity, I think, which is brilliant. And I can see with the similarities between Jack Jr. and his father, I like drawing those parallels because they both don't run away from danger, they run into danger. I mean, you
Mhm.
have Jack Ryan Sr., who didn't hesitate to foil the assassination plot against the royal family in Patriot Games. He just went for it. And Jack's the same. And but I think an interesting dimension you brought to Jack Ryan Jr., you continued an element of his character where he cares about his co-workers. We've seen him have Gavin Briery in the field, the campus IT guru, and watching his back. And now we have a campus accountant who is along for the ride this time, trying to close this deal with HSBC for obtaining this company in Vietnam, which will ensure full control of this technology that's available at the moment, which is an interesting aspect of the book as well. And yeah, I just thought it was just really well done. And I think another relationship that you've done very well, and it's a relationship between two characters which is very close to home for me, is the relationship between Mary Pat and Jack Senior.
Uh-huh.
You know the series backwards; it's evident, and whenever they have an interaction, they've got such a wonderful, long relationship they've had together. And they respect each other. I mean, Mary Pat Foley, his DNI, is the only one that can get away with calling him Jack in private. And I just think that's great how that's explored. And, the impression I got when reading the book and reading that interaction was that you may have been writing in the series for a long time. That's the impression I got. And
Oh, yeah.
I don't want you to take this personally, but I've been pretty outspoken on the channel about a new contributor coming in because I get a bit nervous because it's a series I love and I'm protective of it. But with you, I had nothing to worry about because from the first page, I thought, oh, this guy's done his homework and thorough research and all that sort of thing. So yeah, it was really, really good. And I think another thing that I loved about the book is how you stuck the landing at the end. I really thought introducing the new character of Master Chief Kendrick. I think it's Kendrick. Yeah, Kendrick Moore.
Well,
I not only did you introduce him, which is very hard for a new campus operator to come into a team because it's a close knit team, and have an outsider come in. I think you did that very well. But the ending, the very end scene where Kendrick's character arc comes to an end, what President Ryan did, I teared up because that was a nice touch. It was a very nice touch.
yeah. Thank you. The theme that I wanted throughout this book was one of honor, and so you have honorable characters, and so you have dishonorable, villains, right? That you want to highlight. You have people making honorable sacrifices, and I tried to show that with Jack Jr. by helping out a stricken, less capable colleague throughout. And then you have people who unfairly lost their honor publicly, and deserve redemption. And that was Kendrick Moore. And so I wanted
Yeah.
a character arc for each of those. And in just to finish on that theme with Lizanne, I wanted her to be able. She wanted to feel like she earned it. She's kind of like gone from being a logistics coordinator to an intelligence person without Jack at her side, and she wants to sort of show that she's capable of those things. So I tried to adhere to that theme and to create arcs for all the principal characters, and as you mentioned, Kendrick Moore's was sort of the centerpiece of that.
Yeah, and I really like. It wouldn't be a proper Jack Ryan Jr. or Jack Ryan Senior book without some tech featured throughout. It's cutting edge, isn't it? Project Umbra, I think it's called, where I think not only did you include the tech in the book, but you put an interesting spin on it, because with the antagonists, the Chinese antagonists or Vietnamese antagonists, where there was a monitoring station. I can't reveal too much because people may not have read the book yet, but how it was depicted was very misleading, because the United States government, after initial testing, they thought, beauty, it works. But then, does it kind of work? I felt that was really good, because it actually threw in a bit of a complication there, which was a bit of a nice little twist. And how did you come about bringing that to the book? What was your thought process about putting a twist like that in there?
Well, I think that to be entertaining in reading. I mean, and this I don't this may sound strange, but I kind of write for myself, and I think about what I like and don't like, and if something is too straightforward, it's not that much fun. I think every book should be a little bit of a puzzle. There should be a little bit of mystery behind it, where you keep reading because you want to know what's going to happen, and you want to know why something's happening, and that's just our natural inquisitiveness as humans. And I think that by living through characters, we differentiate books from movies. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons people read. So rather than, even though like I had an outline and everything else, said, okay, there's going to be this technology that Chinese are going to hack into it. To me, it would be a lot more fun to reverse the presentation of that to the reader, so they think everything's fine, but then they realize it's not fine later. And so I think twisting like that is something that I always try to do. I think it's it's part of the job of writing.
Yeah, and it keeps you thinking as well, and challenges you as a reader, which I really, really enjoy. And when President Ryan goes to the research base, I thought that was really good, because one of Ryan's best qualities is you've got Arnie Van Dam, his chief of staff, who's a bit blustery and stressed and pulls his hair out, and he always comes into the Oval Office ruffled, and Ryan was hunkering down and sitting on the stage and addressing them as a man, not the president. Exactly. And Arnie will be in his ear saying, come on, we've got to go. And Ryan's not scared to say, just can it, Arnie, lighten up, let me do my thing, sort of thing. I just find that a really good dynamic with the character of President Ryan. And there's nothing I didn't like about the book. When you mentioned your outline just before, how detailed is that? How much detail do you go into for an outline?
I think I'm working on my 6th or 7th book now, and every time they get a little bit better. I would say the first book, I didn't really have an outline. I had kind of a vague idea of a climactic scene and worked backwards from that, but constantly would be like, gosh, how am I going to get from here to here? And it was almost like a rolling outline. Like you would go, okay, well, what will happen in the next 3 or 4 chapters? And I might plot that far. But then I learned later that you can just save yourself a lot of time by having a pretty good outline at the beginning, because you know where to put in, puts and takes and other things that will end up being important later. So if you don't have an outline, I feel like you have to rewrite very substantially. Otherwise, you end up in multiple cul-de-sacs that were a waste of time, or having to re-engineer something because you found an ending you liked, that kind of thing. So to me, that outline is really important. In terms of detail, I would say that I break stories down into 3 acts, and know that there's going to be a prologue and an epilogue, for example.
Yeah.
I think about what the incipient incident would be in the prologue, and I think about what the resolution would be in the epilogue. And then in each of those 3 parts, I start with, a two or three paragraph summary of what's going to happen there, and then I'll usually break that down into about 12 different chapters, by perspective, and that's about as detailed. That's about as detailed as it gets.
Yeah, sounds pretty foolproof, because it could be very easy to go off on a tangent. If you've got a roadmap there, it keeps you in line, and I guess it prevents you from coming to the computer and thinking, okay, what am I doing today? There are 2 types of writers. There are the
Right.
pantsers, what they call the pantsers, fly by the seat of their pants, or outliners. And I can see the real value in outlining, because you'd sit at your computer and it's there. Oh, this is what I need to do today. It's very, very clear. So, and it keeps you on track. And I think it would speed up the writing process too. It would be a lot quicker writing process than just going by the seat of the pants, wouldn't it?
Well, keep in mind, when you have, in my current Clancy contract, I basically have a book due every 7 months, and
Yeah.
so if you don't have a strong process, you're gonna fall behind. And
Yes.
the other thing that I think happens is, without realizing it, because it's a multi-month process to write a book, sometimes a multi-year process.
Mm,
You
mm,
your attitude, your moods, the things that you're sort of interested in, even your voice can modify a little bit over that time. And so I think
mm.
that by adhering to an outline, you can stay pretty true to the story and sort of root out impulses that might not be as healthy.
Yeah. And what else was I going to say? You were in the US Navy,
Mhm.
and you, there was required reading. Tom Clancy's earlier books were required reading in the military as well. Is that before your time in the military, or have you always been a fan of the books?
So what Hunt for Red October came out, the book, when I was just entering training, and I remember reading it, and it wasn't required or anything like that, but it was all very exciting to just have a book about the U.S. Navy, and a hero that everybody liked, and kind of an exploration of submarines. The book that I really quite enjoyed, honestly, at that time was Red Storm Rising,
Right.
because
Yeah.
it was like the first time I'd seen a realistic kind of World War III book, and it was the height of the Cold War and all that stuff. So that was super cool. Um, so I think it was just one of those things that helped make that helped present the Navy back to the public in a way that hadn't really been done before. I credit Tom Clancy with creating that genre. There had been movies about the Navy. There have been excellent books, right? Like King Mutiny, one of my favorite books of all time. Winds of War and War and Remembrance, love those books. But Clancy did it in a modern fashion, where it wasn't World War II, it wasn't historical fiction, etc. It was more like what if kind of fiction, but
Yeah.
done in a really, really accurate way, where you got to see behind the curtains, of the U.S. force. So that kind of stuff was new and exciting for those of us who were just embarking on our military careers.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite book out of the whole series? Not just Clancy's books, but the legacy titles before, the Mark Greaney era, and Grant Blackwood, and Mike Madden, and Mark Cameron. Do you have any favorites at all across the series?
I think Clear and Present Danger was maybe my that I like that, and Some of All Fears. I think of the overall Jack Ryan books. I thought those two were really interesting because they went down. Clear and Present Danger went down into Latin America and exposed a current drug problem and put a spin on it that I don't think people had seen before, and it made Jack Ryan Jr. himself, kind of get really far out of his comfort zone, which I thought was really cool. And Some of All Fears was like, the really big what if question, and a nuclear bomb, the terrorist bomb going off in the U.S. And what I liked about that book was there was a long section in that book where the characters were trying to grapple with the disaster and get a handle on it, and they all had the facts a little bit wrong. And I love that. I do that myself a lot as a writer because you want the reader to feel like, oh gosh, if only they knew, like you know it as the reader, but they don't, and you can sort of sympathize with what's happening. So those were two that stand out for me.
Yeah, a standout for me in the early era would be Executive Orders. That is a real standout book for me because, I mean, a 747 crashes into the Capitol, decimates pretty much the entire US government. Ryan is thrown into the role of acting president and has to rebuild his cabinet from the ground up. I mean, just incredible stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, that was pretty cool because I felt like when that book came out, and I remember buying the hardback on like the first day, 1996, and what I think Clancy was trying to illustrate was what happens when there's a really honorable man of action who gets thrust into the Oval Office, who's not a natural politician or a bureaucrat. And so it was again fun to see Jack Ryan Sr., as we now call him, advance into that role and face those new challenges, which again, sort of like that maturity aspect, right? It's not all just about, oh, how good are you at knife fighting? It's about how good are you at political infighting and that kind of thing.
That's it. And I think another favorite of mine is a flashback novel, Red Winter, which we haven't seen since Red Rabbit. And I mean, there was so much to like about that one.
Is there? That's a Mark Cameron book, wasn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I have not read that one. I've been intrigued to read it because I think isn't it about Mary Pat Foley mostly, and her husband back in?
Yeah, Jack Ryan Sr. and Mary Pat Foley have to go behind the Iron Curtain in the 80s to bring work on an asset who's defecting, and it explores their relationship. And I'm not going to spoil it for you. I'm glad you told me you hadn't read it, so I can't gush too much. But what you're going to find is if you like the characters of Mary Pat and Jack Ryan and a couple of key cameos I won't reveal, you'll absolutely love the moments in it, because what it does is it's a flashback and the series is already advanced, and it just gives you really good context and a more appreciation for the later books. I think you need to read that ASAP because it is a fantastic one. Yeah, really good stuff.
What is your opinion on I guess you call them flashback books in general? So, for example, Don Bentley, who preceded me in the junior series, and is a friend who I know fairly well, he moved on to do Vince Flynn, right? And has a bestseller out right now, Capture or Kill. And I haven't had the opportunity, I've been too busy to read it, but I believe it's also a flashback for the Mitch Rapp character. So I'm just curious your thoughts on those in series in general.
Oh yeah, I haven't read too much with series authors moving off to other areas yet, so I can't really answer that one. But I think, for an example, being Mark Cameron writing Red Winter, I thought it was done very well. But I do need to read a little bit more of that stuff. I plan on reading your Handler series as well.
Yeah, thanks.
I have actually ordered the first book, but the supply doesn't have stock at the moment. So I was hoping to try and read it before our meet today. But in terms of in series where other writers are going into other areas, I'm not that familiar with it, unfortunately, but something I'm going to have to explore.
Yeah, I don't. When it comes to a flashback thing, there's not a whole lot you could do with Ryan Jr. He's in a way too young, um,
Exactly.
but the thing that I'm enjoying doing right now, because I my second junior book is up for pre-sale. It's called Line of Demarcation,
Yes.
and I won't give it away, but there are echoes to early Clancy books in that one. And
Nice.
I have a third book due here in a couple of months that I'm about, halfway through, and there's echoes to a different Clancy book in that one. So I,
Oh,
I really
nice.
I really like the Easter eggs and things like that of bringing some of those other books forward for
Yeah,
continuity.
it's it's interesting you mentioned that. Have you read Act of Defiance yet, Mike?
No, that's the Andrews and Wilson one.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I haven't had. To be
Okay, another one I won't spoil,
uh,
but let me tell you, when you
no,
mentioned,
let me just
sorry,
say
go
this:
on.
since I got the Clancy gig, I don't have time to read anything. I mean,
Yeah, no, you wouldn't. But
these
let
books.
me tell you, it's interesting you raise the point of other books being referred in the series, and with that book, I'm not going to say spoil anything for you, but there is a major reference to an early book,
No,
which
it's Hunt for Red
absolutely
October.
fantastic. Sorry.
Act of Defiance is like a refreshed Hunt for Red October, I believe, right?
Yeah, you're on the right track, but I'm not saying anything
All right.
because yeah, I don't spoil it for anyone. But it's interesting you said about referring to other books. So, how big up does that take in the books you're writing at the moment? I mean, is it a major catalyst for events that happen? Can you describe to me in general terms how the link will happen? I mean, is it going to be a big reference or just a passing reference to
I,
other classes?
I would put it generically. I might put it this way. There are generational things that happen. So if you think about villains in past books, well, they have relative. If they were killed in past books, they have people who want revenge from that, for example.
Oh, very much like Dead of Honor was a good example of that.
Yeah, exactly. And so, taken as a whole between Jack Sr. and Domingo Chavez and John Clark, like they have plenty of guys
Oh yeah,
pissed off around the world, right? And so
yeah.
I like to mine some of the ones that are maybe a little less obscure or take it in a slightly different direction, so it doesn't feel like anything like a rinse and repeat. But for true fans of the series, they go, "Oh yeah, I can see how that relates back to that earlier core incident."
That's a kind of element that's in Active Defiance as well, which you'll enjoy.
Yeah,
So
I can't wait to get time to. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's really, really good. So tell me how you got your start. I mean, how does someone get the gig of writing in the Clancy universe? I mean, did the Clancy estate approach you, or did your agent or editor approach on your behalf? How did it all come about?
So there is a Tom Clancy estate who owns the rights to these characters, as you might imagine, and they maintain a business relationship with this publisher, which is Putnam and Sons, and
Yeah.
Putnam and Sons is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And
Yes.
so when I wrote my first book, The Handler, in 2021, I think, and then a follow up called Dead Drop the next
Yep.
year. My editor for both of those books is also the editor. He's at Penguin Random House under the Berkeley imprint, but he wears a
Mhm.
second hat as the editor for the Clancy series under the Putnam imprint. And so he basically he approached me. He said, "Hey, I'd really like to see what Ryan Jr. would be like, under your hands and with your style." And he considers me to be more of a character-driven author, I think, and I think that that's where he wanted to take.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
so that was how that went down, and I never talked to the Clancy estate. I only hear about them through him, right? Like, oh, they like this, or that kind of stuff. But he's been doing this so long, and he's the editor for he was the editor for Tom Clancy when he was still alive,
Wow.
and he is the editor for the current senior and junior book. So a big part of his job is making sure that myself and Andrews and Wilson, for example, stay coordinated. We're not stepping on each other's toes. That there's total continuity for the series.
Yep.
That the conversations that have, like, he corrected me in Shadow State. I think I might have had Jack Jr. getting a little mouthy or something like that to John Clark, and he said, "No, you got to tone that down a little bit, Or I think I might have had Jack Sr. Saying something a little bit off color, and he's like, "No, goody two shoes, right? Can't do that." I had him firing a guy that he hired, and they said, "Nope, he never makes a bad hire." So, yeah,
that's good.
those were all really minor things, but once you learn them, you're like, okay, got it. I totally get the rules, and enjoy. This third one's really just so much fun to do, and it's
wow.
You can't believe you get to do this and get paid for it. It's really great.
Yeah, so Line of Demarcation comes out in May, as I understand it. So are we looking at an October, November release for book 3 for you?
They haven't told me yet, but yeah, that would be my guess.
Okay, no worries. And I need to get my hands on an advanced reading copy of Line of Demarcation, I think. Are they going to become available on NetGalley or?
Well, the way I think so. I don't know. They don't tell me that much about that stuff. But in terms of the editing process, I just got what are called the first pass copies. That's a PDF where it actually looks like a book, and it's your last chance to basically review it and find typos. And even though you do that over and over, there's still a few that make it out there. Just drives me crazy. And I get emails from readers, "Hey, right? Use the wrong word here." You're like, "Oh, damn it."
Yeah. Do you, Mike, do you have beta readers?
Not really.
No.
My wife reads stuff with me, and I actually read aloud to her, because I read aloud quite a bit, because I find that that's where you can hear funky rhythm in prose and in dialogue, or where a word can sound awkward, or you'll catch an echo like a rhyme, things like that.
Yeah. How many Jack Ryan Jr. books are you slated to do?
I don't know. We'll see. as many as they will let me. Right now there appears to be a good appetite for it, and I see this going on for at least the next couple of years.
Yeah, good. Do you have I know this might be top secret, but do you have a title yet for book 3?
I do, but I better not say it, because so far I'm like 1 for 3 in trying to get, actually, no, I'm 2 for 5 in trying to get a title to stick. So I feel like I have a good one, but I don't want to say what it is yet.
Okay. And let's go back in time a little bit. How did you get your start in writing? How did that all come about? Was it from a very young age? Because you do have 2 different types of writers who have been writing since they were very young, and then some who come into it a little bit late. How old were you when you started writing, and how did all that come about?
I was always very interested, even as a kid. I made, like sort of attempts, because I was a big reader as a kid. And I just thought it was cool. And then I think when I was in the Navy, you're at sea. There's not a lot to do when you do have downtime. So you work out, you read, and then I started to write a lot while on ships. That was all. I didn't know what I was doing. How would I, right? But it was fun, and you try and things like that. And then I never really completed anything. I would always just get interrupted. And then I returned to all this about around the year 2002, 2003, right after 9/11. I did complete a book then and had a few interested agents and things, but I got too busy to deal with it. I had a real job, kids and all that kind of stuff. And then
Yeah.
I didn't really write again um, until 2019. And I had started thinking about what became the handler, but COVID happened, and all of a sudden I had a lot more time on my hands in terms of commute, things like that. So I would just sort of work on it in the morning, and it ended up being, much getting to a place that exceeded my expectations. And I was financially at a position where I was able to really stop and start doing that full time. And so that's what I did back in 2021, and have been extremely happy ever since.
Yeah. And can you tell us a bit about the Handler series? I mean, is it going to be a longer series? Do you have a set amount of books in mind? And I noticed that there's, just from what I've read about the series, because I really would like to get into it, there's a bit of a family dynamic in the CIA kind of
Yeah,
situation there.
it's about a divorced couple, and the husband, whose name is John, he wants to be done with being in the CIA, and he had more of an operational role in special activities, but he's really had enough and didn't like the politics of it, etc. But his wife, who he's with, who he's not divorced from, she's much more careerist and has continued on, and so on and so forth. And the setup for the handler is that she is a player, politically engaged and everything like that, but there's a reason that her bosses need to get her ex-husband back into the field, and they he doesn't like them, right? And they know he'll turn down their overtures, and so they come to her and say, you basically got to pull him back in and kind of run him, as your guy. We really need it. And so she sort of has to bite her lip and tongue, and obviously there's a lot of natural conflict between two divorced people, having to get back together and work together. And yeah, they have a daughter, and that's all. I had a ball in both of those books so far, mining the complexities of marriage that blurs into professionalism, and long buried frustrations that might emerge, and those types of things.
And there's no set limit on the series. You're going to be writing as many books as you can in that one.
Yeah, I have a third one. To be honest, the Clancy series sort of interrupted it because it got really busy. I have a third one that I'm hoping to finish. It's about 2/3 done. I'm hoping to finish up when I get done with this current Clancy book. So you kind of want to get the Clancy book done so you have enough time to return
Yeah.
to it before you go to the next Clancy book. And in between, I wrote another standalone book that is a Navy war book, which was a real passion project of mine, and that will be published August of 2025. So that those between Clancy and my war book, those two things took me away from the handler for a little while, but I'm looking forward to getting back to it soon.
It's certainly a series I'm going to be starting. I just got to get my hands on it as soon as the supply gets stocked back in. But it sounds really, really good. Now, coming back to the Ryanverse, you did say that you did collaborate a little bit with Don Bentley, who he only did 3 books, I think, and it's a shame he didn't continue because he really only just got started before he finished. I think he was really getting some momentum there. Do you collaborate with? Have you spoken with Mark Greaney or any of the others about the series? Yeah.
Yeah. So Mark, so because the editor has been the same all along, right? It's actually a pretty small world. So Mark, even with the Gray Man, this editor Tom, he is the editor for that as well. So when I came out on with the Handler, it was that editor. he introduced me right away to Mark and Don. Andrews and Wilson weren't around yet, but we met and had dinner and those kinds of things. And Mark's been very gracious. That's probably the most experience of all of us. He told me what it was like, co-writing with Clancy and just co-writing in
Yeah,
general. And then
he's the only one that did it. Yeah.
yeah. And then his approach to the series and what that did for his career. And then at the time we were discussing that, I didn't know I was going to be doing the Clancy series. It was a couple of years ago. And then Don, we actually did like a handoff. And what happened there was that Kyle Mills, who was writing the Vince Flynn series,
Yes.
who were all writing for these dead guys, but Kyle Mills, I think it had been doing it for like 12 years or something, and I think just wanted a break. And so he basically voluntarily stopped. That created an opening, and it was a good opportunity, I think, for Don, because I think the pace is a little slower. Like there's one book a year, not two. So you can do some other things with your life. And I think that Don just saw that as like a good opportunity to for his career. That opened this up for me. So when Don was moving on, he was really, really great with his time. He still is. And so I'll text him occasionally and go like, "Hey, who did did Dan Murray have a kid?" And he'll go, "Man, I don't remember," or whatever. But it's kind of funny. And yeah, there was one time where I asked him I forget what it was, but I was like, it cracks me up that neither of us have any idea, so I get an awful lot off of basically wikis and things like that for the Ryanverse. Hugely helpful. And those authors.
And there's something that's been bugging me about the series. It's a jigsaw puzzle that you might be able to help me with. And it hasn't been addressed for 7 books. There's been a seed that's been planted at the end of Chain of Command. That was the one where something happens with Kathy Ryan in that one, and a siege at a local shopping mall. And if you've read the book, at the end of that, there's a highway cop, I think, called goes by the name of Chili, and he lights up a truck on the highway, and he pulls up Ding Chavez and John Clark. And because of his efforts in assisting in the siege of the mall, he's offered a job, but we don't see him. We haven't seen him since. Has that been addressed?
You're going to see him in Line of Demarcation.
Oh, there you go. Answered my question. That is really, really good.
Yeah. Stephen Billy Edwards. Yeah, no, I know him quite well. And also
good.
Mandy Cobb. Mandy Cobb is a ex-FBI agent, and she was fairly new to the campus as introduced by Mark Cameron, and so she's also in Line of Demarcation.
Oh, that's fantastic. I've been waiting.
Wait is over.
That's great. And something else about the series in general too that I'm curious about. You're evolving Jack Ryan Jr. now. Andrews and Wilson are looking at Katie Ryan. Oh, she is a force of nature. I can't wait for you to read Act of Defiance. What they've done with her is absolutely brilliant. And so there's another sibling. We've got Kyle, who is Katie's twin. And he has a brief mention in Act of Defiance, and I'm not sure whether you are aware on whether or not anyone else is going to come in and develop him. Is there anything there on the cards, do you think?
I think it's certainly possible. So I haven't done it, in these next 2 books, but that's something that I have been thinking about.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait for next year when Line of Demarcation comes out. It's going to be a day one read for me, as all the Ryan books are. I mean, I just can't get enough of it. There's nothing the only series that comes close to me as a favorite is Jack Reacher. But I've been a fan of Tom Clancy books for a long, long time. And, I just can't wait for it to continue and to read a lot more books in the series. It's going to be fantastic.
Well, hey man, I wouldn't get to do this if it wasn't for fans like you, and I appreciate you doing, enjoying those and sharing them as you do with your podcasts.
Yeah, I love it. I put up a an ultimate reading guide, so it was really good for me to go back through, and I actually mentioned every book and starting points and things like that. I mean, I had a couple of different starting points. In fact, what's interesting is just something a little bit different. You can start with Active Defiance and then go back to a very earlier book without any issues there. But there's a couple of starting points you can go from. You can even start with Red Winter as a starting point there as well. But yeah, it's just really good to revisit the series and try and get people to read it, because it's become a lot more accessible to readers.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, it's been for a lot of years, it was a mainly male readership. But now, with the introduction of Katie Ryan, I think that you can get more readers on board. And yeah, I can't say too much. I'd love to gush about Active Defiance as well, but you haven't read it, so I'm not going to spoil anything there. But one more question about the writing process as well. In terms of your writing routine, what does a typical day look like for you? I mean, how many hours do you write? Do you write at night or in the mornings, or what does that look like?
Yeah, for me, it's always in the mornings. I've always been an early riser, and I will usually, my eyes will kind of pop open whether I want them to or not at 4:30, right? And what a lot of times I'll go, oh, you don't want to get up yet, but then I'll start thinking about if I have a deadline, I'm in the middle of a book, I can't help it. I just start thinking about it, and my mind is most fertile that time of day. So I usually get up and work on that until about off and on, you have to run errands, go work out, things like that. But until about usually 1 or 2 in the afternoon. The later in the afternoon is not very good. And I try to reserve the rest of the afternoon and the night for sort of background processing. Because a lot of times you wake up and you go, oh, I know what I'm going to do, when you're kind of stuck on something. It's just a curious way that the brain seems to work. So I do it. That's sort of the daily schedule. And again, I've learned to create a couple tools to keep me in line. One is the outline. The other that I do, which might sound kind of funny, but I create a character grid with, kind of like if you were to go to IMDb for a movie, and you go, who's in this movie? And you see like the 12 faces, right? Like I go pick off faces off the internet of actors or whoever. And I go like, that's what he looks like. And I describe who he is and so on and so forth. And basically an Excel thing, and keep that printout in front of me, because when I'm really into a story, I feel like the characters can kind of move the story along on its own if they're really well defined, versus you trying to force fit them into some plot device. So that's kind of how I go about it.
So I'm curious, what were some of the actors you used for some of the characters in that way?
Well, for Mary Pat Foley, I think of Celia Ward, for example, right? For Kendrick Moore, he's not really an actor, but he got fired yesterday from the New York Jets. Robert Saleh, the head coach, on TV, like Super Bowl. For John Clark, I kind of think of Ed Harris a little bit. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, good. That's a very interesting way of doing it. Yeah.
For me, Jack Ryan Sr. is always going to be Harrison Ford.
Do you know what? What would be amazing now? He's Harrison Ford's at that age where how cool would it be if they released a Jack Ryan Jr. movie and he was President Ryan in it? Because he's played a president before in Air Force One. He would nail it, and I think it would be fantastic to see him on screen with a young Jack Ryan Jr. It'd be fantastic, wouldn't it?
And by the way, when I was at Amazon, I worked in Prime Video and worked on the show, Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan, and the star of that was John Krasinski. And so that show was a reboot of Jack Ryan, who really, frankly, ends up being about like my Jack Ryan Jr., right? So I often think of John Krasinski in that role as my junior, because he's about like the right age and size and everything.
John Krasinski was remarkable. I mean, it's one thing to do well in a role, but it's also another thing to break out of the mold of Jim Halpert from The Office.
Yeah,
the
no,
characters couldn't be any more different. And you know what grabbed me about Krasinski's performance in it when in series one, season one, where he's got his hands on the desk, leaning over the people trafficker, and
yeah,
he's giving him that 1,000-yard stare. I mean, oh my God, you are Jack Ryan. It's like the righteousness and the
right.
drive. I think he did really well in the role.
And also the kind of good education and the cleverness and intelligence. That's something that I really like to put into Junior. Like he's going to figure something else out, and he's going to combine that with those character qualities to say, hey, I don't just see it. I'm going to push this because it's not right. You know, I'm going to insist
exactly
on it.
right. And you raise a really good point there, because in Shadow State, all the experts are looking at the books.
Yeah.
And they're saying, Jack, come on, it's done. It's a sweet deal. It's all good. No, there's something going on here. He has the same instinct as his dad, and I find that one of the best qualities in his character, because he's like, no, look, it's all about pattern recognition, and he's like, things aren't adding up here. I need to look into it, because don't sign on the dotted line yet. I just really love that. So,
and that's a skill and a character trait, I think, that he could apply to, say, analyzing intelligence reports, or in that case, you know, looking at a company's books. Either way, that same natural curiosity is going to emerge.
Yeah. And a final question: what advice would you give to beginning writers?
I think to get figure out what genre you want to write in, go see what books are successful in that genre, and tear them apart. Like really analyze them. Look at how many characters are in this, what perspectives do we see, how long are chapters, how many words approximately is it, how many things happen, you know, what sort of like
you could reverse engineer a book, couldn't you?
Reverse engineer it. And there's a reason that those books are successful and act the way they do. And then re-engineer it with tools like we talked about, outline, character grids, things like that. Because until you have that blueprint right, you could really go off in a lot of bad directions and waste your time.
It sounds like a very foolproof method, which is obviously working for you, because obviously you've got 2 more books in process. So I just can't wait to continue reading your books. So I'd like to, on that note, I'd like to personally thank you for coming on. I've been wanting to speak to a Ryanverse contributor for a while, and you've nailed you've written a very good book. I loved it. Can't rave about it enough. Looking forward to the other books. And I've also got Andrews and Wilson coming on the channel in December as well, which is going to be fantastic. They've kindly agreed to come on, which is going to be awesome, because the more contributors I can speak to about the Ryanverse, the better, because you've got to go after that, because it's my favorite series of all time. So I'm just very humbled that you agreed to come on. I've enjoyed chatting with you, and definitely looking forward to starting the Handler series. I'm very intrigued by that, so I'm going to be prioritizing that. And thank you so much for coming on, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you very much, Chris.
All right, thank you. See you
All
later.
right,
Bye. Ta-da.